Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Eden Road podcast, where on today's show we're going to be reflecting on a pretty underwhelming derby day at the G-Tech on Saturday, as well as briefly looking ahead to Bournemouth at the weekend. Still plenty to talk about though, obviously with the fallout of Saturday's result and some of the things that came about from it. Joining me for that is, we got full house today. Craig, how are you, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. Pleasure to be here as always.
Good stuff. Dan, all good?
All good. Forgot the game happened already.
Callum, joining us from the car, mate. How you doing?
I'm good. I thought I'd give everyone a change of scenery who's watching on YouTube today. So welcome to my car, everyone. I look forward to today's episode.
Good stuff. Just before we get going, guys, remember to drop a comment down below, subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, and also give us a follow on our socials. That's at the Elam Road on Twitter and at Elam Road Pod on Instagram. Tweet of the week this week, lots of contenders with the Toney drama that unfolded at the weekend, but considering how flat the game was, I figured that most of the conversation is going to be about Toney anyway. It's going to take up the main bulk of the episode. So instead of talking about that in the intro, I thought we'd go with something funnier and keep the Toney chat for later. It's actually from Facebook this week, but Josh M _ 2002, I know he listens to the pod, tweeted out on Facebook. This is David Woodman on Facebook. Something needs to be done about these fucking pigeons. He's in the West Stand yesterday and a pigeon shat on me, went all down the front of my Brentford shirt. Thought it was supposed to bring good luck. Did it fuck? Thomas Frank out at the end of that. I hope that's a joke. What's your thoughts on the pigeons?
He's not wrong about the pigeons, though, Mike. I'll tell you, there was an invasion on Saturday. God knows what was going on. It was more interesting watching the pigeons than it was the football, to be honest with you. So,
Craig, have you had any bad experiences with pigeons in the West End?
Just dickheads like Callum, really. That post is there's a Facebook.
You watch yourself, Craig. You watch yourself.
Right, let's just crack on to Fulham. I think it's going to be a relatively short conversation about the game itself, as I mentioned in the intro. Dan, initial reaction to the draw?
Like I said in the intro, it didn't really feel like the game happened. It felt like the least intense derby game that I'd ever attended. You could tell both teams were kind of on the beach. I thought the game started quite fast. There was a lot of movement to the penalty box, and then the final bit for both teams weren't there. I think obviously Brian hit the bar. Keane Lewis Potter maybe should have done better with when it bounced back to him. But ultimately, the end we could have easily lost it, because I thought Jimenez probably had the best chance of the lot when he skied it over in the second half. It was a bit disappointing. I felt that I wanted a bit more. I thought we could have been a bit braver. I thought that we could have taken more risks. I'm not sure the substitutes are right, and I think we'll go on to talk about things like that. But it just summed up the end of the season, really. That there wasn't much to talk about, wasn't much to cheer on. There's 2 weeks in a row now since we've secured our safety where it's just been a bit flat, and it's just it's a shame. I thought that we could use these last few games to really show what we're about and take the pressure off and just play our football. But yes, it's just very flat.
Yeah, it is weird. After Luton as well, considering the people that we got back from injury, we get 5 goals against Luton. I know it's difficult when we know that we're safe now, but in a derby match, you don't really need any excuse to get up for it. You should be up for it regardless of whether you're safe or whether the teams have anything to play for. Any complaints with the lineup, Craig? Nice to see KLB back in the 11. I thought it was quite harsh on Wissa, but that's just by virtue of the fact that Toney is undroppable in Frank's eyes. But any complaints with the lineup, Craig?
Oh, I think that, again, the only complaint that a lot of people will have is that Ivan's in it. I know a lot of people still want him in the team, and well, actually, do you know what? I'm going to say prior to the game, it felt like a lot of people were sticking up for him, saying that he's our striker, he plays no matter what. And then after the game, there was kind of a turn. There was a turn definitely against him, where now people don't want him in the team. And we said last week after the Everton game that we sacrificed the game to facilitate him playing, and it felt like we've done it again. It feels like he's moved on already. Now, that might be a harsh thing to say, but I just think he's already bags and whatnot. They're not even out at the door. They're out the club already. They're on the bus.
Yeah. Callum, Callum, what was your thoughts on the lineup? Some of the substitutions that Dan mentioned. Genuinely, I think this section we're actually talking about the game itself. I think we should give credit to Damsgaard, and we will in a second. But what was your thoughts on the game, Callum, and some of the substitutions, maybe the lineup as well?
Well, I think the first half, I think we had some very positive moments. We passing the ball around pretty well. I was very impressed with, how the midfield were working and linking up with our wingers, especially. But the second half seemed rather dull, to say the least. We didn't create any opportunities. We lost that intensity every time we were possibly going up the pitch as well. We were getting caught out in the midfield and creating space for their front three. I must say the referee didn't help either team on Saturday. I thought he was dire, to say the least, and he went off with a little smirk at the end by all the. It's frustrating, to say the least. So, but I would say, look, substitutes were hard to watch. I did not agree, firstly, with KLP being taken off. I think he played an incredible game, again, causing a lot of problems. We saw that little flick over and then creating opportunity in the first half. It was unfortunate no one was up with him. I think he was causing a lot of problems for their back line, especially Bassey. And he was then taken off. And you could tell the frustration, firstly, from the fans, and then secondly, from the man himself, where it looked like at one point he was going off in a different direction to where even Thomas Frank was. And I just think he didn't even want to, even shake. Thomas Frank obviously likes to shake each individual's hand when they've come off the pitch, congratulate them on how they've played. He looked like a man who did not want to be anywhere near Thomas Frank. And I don't blame him. He should have been on that pitch for the full 90 minutes. He did nothing wrong to be taken off after 60 minutes yet again. That's a player you usually take off who's not having any part to play within the game, and he's taking him off. And then the substitutions afterwards as well, again, there were a lot of groans after the second or third substitute. So it was, they were being made just simply because, number one, Mbeumo was actually partially injured, I thought. He was niggling. He looked like in a little niggle. Secondly, you had a striker up front who, quite frankly, as Craig has said, he's already packed his bags. They're gone. When realistically, he should be working hard to get into the team. If Southgate was there on Saturday, he'd be picking Solanke. Jermaine Defoe yesterday also even said another possible player, Callum Wilson.
You mentioned KLP being hooked, and you also mentioned Brian looked like he was carrying a bit of an injury, Callum. I thought Brian, in the last two games, and we kind of talked about this on the podcast before, historically, when Brian's at it, he kind of justifies those links with Liverpool, and he justifies people like us saying that he could do it at a Champions League club when he's at it. But his problem has forever been consistency. I don't think we've seen that level of consistency since the Championship days. He's kind of in and out, in and out. When he's at his best, like he was at Luton, he's unbelievable. But against Everton, he kind of went missing. And I know it's difficult. And against Fulham, it's difficult as well, because you're up against Anthony Robertson, who I think has been statistically one of the best fullbacks in the league this year, and he kind of had his number all day. But
massively.
Well, so correct. I'll put it to you, Dan. Do you think Thomas? The thing is, I don't think he's ever going to sub Toney. He's never going to sub Brian either. But when KLP is playing that well, and has been for the last few games when he's been in the lineup, it makes us question why he's not hooking someone like Brian Mbeumo to maybe bring on a Shada, as opposed to hooking someone like KLP, Dan, when he's been playing so well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think anybody should be undroppable, or anyone should be exempt from being taken off if they're not having a good game. It doesn't set a good example, and it, allows certain players to think that, maybe if I'm not quite on it today, or if I don't quite give 100% today, it'll be okay because I'll stay on and I'll still play the 90 minutes. And that's not right. I think it should be based on merit. Of course, you have players that you look at, if it's 0-0, you think, I need to keep them on because, they've always got a goal in them or something. I do understand that to an extent. But especially if someone's bad patch has been prolonged, or if there's other players on the pitch who really look a threat, then you shouldn't be able to, determine the substitutes just like that. I think you can tell when someone's warming up, when someone comes on for Brentford. I think a lot of the fans kind of have an idea as to who will come off because it's often the same people. It's often Damsgaard, KLP, the ones who we think that Thomas Frank don't fancy as much because, next week Jensen will probably come back in, for example, and Damsgaard will probably find himself on the bench again, despite how well he's played in recent weeks. And it makes it very difficult for those players to get back in. And I just think it sets a bad example. A bit like Ivan Toney being given the armband after all he said, after the way he's spoken about the club, the fact he's clearly not committed to us in the longer term, but yet gets given the armband. It just demonstrates that, is it okay to do those things?
Yeah.
And still be in a leadership role.
You mentioned Damsgaard. I'll come to you, Craig. Another fantastic performance. I know you're Damsgaard's #1 fan. Makes you wonder why he was dropped against Everton. And also, like we just mentioned, why he came off at the weekend. I think there was quite a bit of uproar about the fact that he was substituted on the weekend. Even Brentford put out a tweet that kind of highlighted his key passes and his chances created and tackles and duels. And the duels is his. I've looked at his stats about sort of ball winning recoveries in recent weeks. He's right up there in terms of people that win the ball back for our team. But talk to me about Damsgaard, Craig. Another really good performance. This run of form towards the end of the season, it's been really positive, and it's nice that we've seen him now. 4, 5, 6 games where he's been our best player. You're just praying to fuck that he carries this form on into next season.
He's setting himself in good stead to be one of those players that is going to be a mainstay in the midfield next season. Should he, keep himself fit? He's been fantastic, and I'm still so gutted that goal got disallowed against Sheffield United. I'm still so gutted for him. He's been fantastic. I mean, probably ever since the Villa game. So we're talking about the last 5 games appearances that he's made. He's been phenomenal for the team. When he breaks through and goes through in the second half, I would say 1-on-1, but he was in his own half. His name lit up in glory, didn't it? But let's be honest, he was never really going to make any ground on like Troy
Ore.
Yeah, he was never going to
the quickest players in the league
ground on them. But it was a moment of, oh my god, it was one of them. But no, yeah, he's never going to do anything with that. But yeah. I'm just so glad that the other fans are also recognizing the fact that he is actually pretty good, and maybe Thomas Frank did make the right decision in bringing him in, because like we've said, he's the one that was the main decision factor on bringing Damsgaard over to the Bees. So I'm just so glad he's doing well.
Yeah, 100%. Is there anything else we want to talk about from the game specifically before we just kind of divulge into the Toney chat? Anything else you wanted to mention?
So I do want to. Sorry, Dan. Go on, mate. Go on. I'll let you go.
All right. I would have maybe started someone like Yarmo ahead of or someone. I think we'd learn a bit more from having that kind of midfield free, see what he can do in these types of games. And I feel like it would potentially result in a more positive game. I think I do think Yanelt and Norgard in certain games are a bit too similar, and I don't think we need both of them in certain games against teams that we can expect to compete against on a more level playing field. So I thought I'd maybe give him a go from the start, but yeah, that's all from me really.
What I was going to say was we talk about how he has to be consistent to perform well in Brighton and Bournemouth, but even when he has his long periods in the game that he did against Everton and then this week as well, it still feels like he is one of those players that no matter how he plays, he's going to create chances. He's hit the crossbar from a very tight angle, and really unfortunate that it hasn't dropped the right side of the line. Instead, it's ricocheted out to Keane. But he's one of those players that no matter how he plays, you can almost guarantee that he's going to have one moment of brilliance in a game where he's going to create a chance or something's going to happen. And it was just unfortunate that this week he just happened to hit the crossbar. He's back to that last season or first season when he was just hitting the post or the bar every opportunity he got. Yeah,
no, you are right. I think it's just something we've perennially talked about on the pod. Like when he's at it, he's amazing. When he's not, he can go missing in games. But you're absolutely right. There will be 1 or 2 moments in every game that he plays where he skins his defender or creates a chance for someone else or hits the bar or something like that. Just on Yarmo, he got absolutely bodied for that Jimenez chance. Absolutely bodied. Oh my god! If that had went in, he would have been memed a lot. So I'm glad that it didn't, because he got weighted. But let's move on to Toney. I'm going to read out some tweets before we dive into this, because I feel like there's a difference of opinion between fans at this point. And I feel like we said last week, Craig, I remember saying to you that I think there might be potential for it to get ugly at the stadium if he dropped another stinker. And he did drop another stinker. And I feel like now the tide is completely turned out of Toney's favour. But I am going to read out a couple of tweets in Toney's favour just before, and kind of caveat the conversation with those just before we kind of get into it, because I've kind of got a few questions and we'll just kind of talk about it organically. But first, we've got someone, BFC Kev, I guess, the guy on Twitter who's got Kim as his profile picture. Funniest thing about these Toney chances is that it will be the same freaks that celebrate Morpay being made permanent in the summer. Who cares about results when a bloke kisses the badge? We've got at Roy PSB. Shame on those booing and singing about Toney. Yeah, he was rubbish and shouldn't be playing. But doing that to your own is a whole new level of arsehole. That one got quite a lot of traction as well. I saw a lot of people replying to that. And then Christian Norgard as well. I saw some tweets and an article in the Daily Mail saying Toney deserves a lot of praise for what he's done for the club. He got us promoted, scored a bunch of goals both in the Championship and in the Premier League. He deserves his move. And I think that was in relation. I think someone might have asked him if he heard some of the boos when Toney was given the armband. But I thought I'd just put those three tweets in there to give the other side of the argument. I think we're all on the side now where we don't really care if Toney plays. And the fact that he's dropping these performances and what he said about the club in the past, it's not really going in his favour. So first of all, like I said, Craig, we chatted about the possibility of it getting ugly against Fulham on the last pod. And I remember you saying you didn't think it would at the stadium, but it did. What was your initial reaction to the fallout of Saturday?
I did actually respond to one of those tweets, the one by Roy. I actually responded to it as well. And he said, yeah, it is rubbish and shouldn't be playing, but doing that to your own is a whole new level of arsehole. So I responded to it and said, thankfully, Ivan Toney hasn't said anything negative about the club during this time. So all I'm going to say is what goes around comes around. If you're going to be a dick about the club, then the fans have every right to be a dick to you, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm shocked at, and maybe I was part of that, and I know we were when we did the tier list as well, but part of one of the ones that just dealt with the fact that he was a bit of a dick, you know, dealt with the fact that he's a bit of an arsehole himself. I dealt with the fact that he doesn't want to be here, but he scores a lot of goals. Now, I know, everyone knows there's no loyalty in football. You know, people are going to come, people are going to go, but you show respect for the people that you know, the club that you play for and the fans that you play for.
And pay your wages.
And the people that pay your wages, yeah. You know what I mean? If I spoke about my job the way that he spoke about Brentford, I'd have been sacked. I'd have been sacked a long time ago. But the people chanting, do you know what? I really couldn't care. If he wants to treat the club in that way, then he should be able to reciprocate. And it's shocked me that it's actually taken this long for fans to finally turn on him.
Yeah. Dan, what do you reckon?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, yes, he scored lots of goals. I'm grateful for that. Yes, he's allowed to be ambitious. Who isn't? I mean, he didn't grow up a Brentford fan. He's allowed to want to play at the top. I'm sure he's not the only one that wants to do that. He played a big part in our journey, but so did other people. So did the likes of David Raya, who obviously this time last year also had similar ambitions of playing for a top team. But he didn't go out into the media and he didn't do all these interviews, pushing for a move essentially. He went about it the right way. And he didn't have to sign a new contract. It's not the fact that Toney's not signing a new contract. That's not the issue. He's perfectly entitled to go and get that move for himself. But Raya went about it the right way. He respected the club until the end. I'm sure he still holds Brentford close to him. And look at him now. Look what he's doing now. And I think, if anything, what Toney's done is put certain clubs off of him. And also, he's not playing well at the moment. And if you're not playing well and you're talking like that, then there's no reason for you to be in the team. There is no reason for you to be in the team. And it's not right that he's undroppable. Because even based on current form, there's a good argument for to bring someone in for him. And like I keep saying, if he's not going to be here next season anyway, and we've already replaced him, so we're pretty sure he's not going to be here next season anyway, then what is the point of him overshadowing, because he is. I think he's overshadowing these last few games because that's all we're talking about. And I don't think there's much coincidence that we scored 5 against Luton when he wasn't in the team, and the front threes look very flat in the last two games, and we haven't scored a single goal since he's come back. And I think it's affecting others to an extent, even if it's just in relation to their performances.
Yeah, I think I'm glad that you mentioned the fact that I don't think anyone's denying that he's done a lot for Brentford in terms of the goals that he scored to keep us up, and the goals that he scored to bring us up in the first place as well. But I think we also need to remember that the club has done a lot for him in terms of taking that chance on him when he was at Peterborough and there was no Premier League clubs that were looking to bring him in, sticking by him during a time where he kind of brought the club into disrepute through the gambling thing, and then also I think it's like singing. It's like you mentioned, Craig, like singing his name. The fans have sung his name from the point where he came back up until now, pretty much, despite the multiple interviews in which he publicly said that he wanted to play at a top club with no mention of helping Brentford out in the relegation fight. It's just, I'm just surprised. And I mentioned it sort of a couple of weeks ago, I don't know which pod it was, when I said, surely there's someone, his agent or a player or anyone saying when he's doing these interviews and stuff, it's probably a bit too soon considering you've not played in this long, you don't know how well you're going to come back. And there was an interview that he did not too long ago. And I know he did like a spate of interviews in the build up to his return, but there was one that he did maybe a few games in after the ban finished. And I just thought, isn't there someone telling him, this is probably not a good idea, mate. You're going to turn the fans against you. Probably not going to lure any other clubs in to want to buy you. And I think you both just said, do you think he really cares? At this point now, though, if he's heard what Norgard said, he must have heard the boos when he was given the armband, and he must be on social media seeing fans really turning on him now. What kind of send-off do you think he's going to get now? Do you think it's going to be positive, Craig?
What I will say is, before he came back and people were talking about the moves that he might get in January, we were talking about him possibly going to United, possibly going to Chelsea, even Arsenal and Liverpool were teams that were being linked with him. Now, each team, bar maybe 2 or 3 in the Premier League at the moment, are bigger than us. Let's be honest. We're one of, if not the smallest team in the Premier League. So I know we're going to talk about sideways steps being like West Ham and things like that, but there's a reason that we've gone from Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, United to West Ham, and it's because he's tricked himself out of a decent move here by being a dick, and people are going to realise, clubs are going to realise that they don't want a player like that amongst their ranks, someone who's going to come in and stir the pot a bit, stir some feathers, rustle some feathers. It's not a good look for a club to bring a player like that in, and he's the one that's getting himself out of this. It's not the fans doing anything. It's not the fans now booing him. It's not the fans now chanting to get him off. It's his behaviour, it's his attitude, and it's his actions which have caused him going to a top 6 club to another possibly mid-table team in West Ham. I know they've had a few European seasons, but you don't know what they're going to be like without David Moyes now next season and whatnot. So, in regards to the send-off, it could really go one of 2 ways, couldn't it? It could really go one of 2 ways. It could either be people just applaud him and they deal with the fact that he's going, or I can see a section of Brentford fans just singing cheerio to him, just to get him gone, just to piss him off. I think there'll be mixed, very, very mixed emotions and mixed opinions on the day that we know that he's going to be leaving. I, for one, would just be happy to just move on.
So you don't think he's going to get a top 6 club? No. Dan, do you think he's going to get a top 6 club?
Not in this move, anyway.
It's difficult. I think he'll hold out for one initially, but I'm not sure he'll end up at one. I mean, City don't need anyone. I think Arsenal probably are better off going for someone else. Maybe like a Tottenham or someone if he does get a top 6 club. So I don't think he'd be a team competing to win the league or anything like that. But yeah, I could easily see him ending up at the likes of a West Ham or something early next season because he can't find another move.
Are we in any doubts that he would be able to do it at one of these top 6 clubs?
It depends on what attitude he takes to the club with him, because we are the only club that have rolled over and let him do us in the way that he's done us in the league. And I'm adamant that should he act the way he's acted off the pitch at any other club in the Premier League, he wouldn't have lasted as long as he's lasted amongst the fans. He wouldn't have lasted as long as he's lasted amongst the backroom either.
But isn't there an argument that like he wouldn't act that way because if he's already at a top club, he wouldn't be trying to twerk for another move to go to another top club, if you know what I mean?
I mean,
In
he could
terms of-
start City and be twerking for a move to Barcelona, mate. He seems like that type of person. You know what I mean? So,
Dan, are you in any doubts that he could do it at a top six club? Because I feel like one thing that I've always said is that when Toney is at his best, he's one of the best strikers in the league. And granted, we've not seen that basically at all since he's come back, maybe once or twice. Are you in any doubts that he could do it at one of the top six clubs?
I think at his best, he's clearly good enough, but they will not be as patient as we are. I think, a couple of bad games to begin with, and you're out the team. A bad first hour, and you're getting subbed. And that's the difference. We'll stick by him and we'll keep playing him because Thomas Frank, trusts him so much and seems to still think at this stage that it's of benefit to the team to have him around. But they won't be as patient. He could be a substitute. He could get subbed off himself. And if he doesn't hit it off in the first few weeks, you might start to get concerned for him because, it has been over a year now since he's found a spell of consistent form. So that might worry some teams as well. I don't think he's helping himself at the moment by playing because he's just not playing at the level you'd want him to be playing for England or for any clubs that are looking at him.
I think he's now in 10 games without a goal. I think I read somewhere that that's now his longest run without scoring a goal in professional football, maybe in a couple of years or something like that. Callum's back. He's been intermittently in and out of the pod. But Callum, we're talking about Toney.
I'm back.
We're talking about Ivan Toney. So if you want to offer your 2 pence now, go for it. We're talking about the fallout from Saturday, where he's going to end up, if he's going to get a top six club. So go for it, mate. Where are you with the Toney saga?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, I've come in at a good time there, as Dan's saying. He's not helping himself at the moment with his antics yet again, with his attitude. I don't like it. You've got, you've got a big summer coming up as well. You want to prove your point, and he's not doing it. And the frustration's there from the fans. I can't see him getting any other move. I've said this before, other than Newcastle or a move to Saudi. If you're looking at him right now, you're looking at a player who's got a huge attitude problem. And quite frankly, you don't really want a player like that around the football club, your football club. So, that's Ivan Toney for you, really, isn't it?
12
What
games.
did you?
12 games.
12 games without a goal. What did you make of the chanting, the booing on Saturday, Callum? Oh, when he's gone again. No worries. We can.
Callum was the one that was starting it.
Callum was starting it. Let's anything else we want to say about Toney, because I feel like we talk about him every week on this bloody podcast, but it's because he normally is the main talking point.
Just a question: when he goes, do you think we'll get a thank you to Brentford, thank you to the fans? Do you think
I don't know.
Do one of those?
I don't know. I think it very much hinges on that last game against Newcastle, because I feel like what you said about how it could be a mixed reception that he gets from the fans, when they do that little walk around the pitch towards the end, I do feel like there might be little pockets in that West Stand that might not have the nicest words to say about Toney, which I think is understandable. But I don't know. It's from what he's said since the ban in the interviews. I don't think he's actually said anything about sort of wanting to score goals for Brentford and keep Brentford in the league. So it would be difficult to envision him saying anything like "thank you for the time." But I guess it's a common courtesy. And I don't know if he has. Callum said there that he has an attitude problem. I wouldn't suggest that he's got an attitude problem with respect to the playing his football and training, because we have to take it as what we've heard from the players, what we've heard from Frank. They've always said that he's a fantastic trainer and he's great on the training pitch and he's good mates with everyone at the club. It's just the way that he handles himself off the pitch in terms of the interviews. Maybe he's got an agent that, pushing all these interviews forward and getting him in the limelight so he can get this big move. I wouldn't question his attitude on the pitch. I would question it off it and some of his decisions that he's made off it, if that makes sense.
It kind of feels like he's cold quit. Now, he's obviously still playing, still employed by the club, but it feels like he's cold quit. it looks like whenever he's on the pitch, we get minimum effort for minimum output. You know, we're not seeing Ivan Toney at the minute, and I don't recognise this striker that we've had for the last 2 games. I'm going to say 2 games because obviously we had that spell of a front three of KLP, Sharda, Wissa, Brian, whoever else wants to go up there, Malpe as well. We had that fluid front three, but this striker is not. He's not. I don't know whether he's got pressures from somewhere else or what, but he's not. He is not the Ivan Toney that we watched last season. He's not the Ivan Toney that we watched in the first 5 games when he came back from from suspension. Sorry, he is not that striker, and something's obviously changed. But the problem is when he was having success in front of goal, and when he was having like inputting the games and affecting the game. We had this conversation about Mark Flecken, saying when Mark Flecken starts to have influence on the outcomes of the results, people will start to turn and back him. And since that City game, when he had a blinder and we went to Wolves and he made that save against, and he got a save of the month, that save did, people started to get behind him rather than on top of him. But now people were behind Ivan because he was scoring goals at the start. He scored like 4 goals in 5 games. And now he hasn't got that output. People are starting to get on top of him. And he's one of those players that doesn't get pressure on him. He said that himself, but it looks like he's under pressure. He looks like he's playing as a player under pressure. Maybe it's England, maybe it's the Euros, but he doesn't look like he's enjoying himself, which makes it not enjoyable for the fans because we're accommodating a player that looks like their head's not in the right place. They're not enjoying themselves. They don't want to play. They don't want to be there. It's a difficult one. I just think we need to get him gone. Get him out of the team. Let him be around the squad if he has to be, but get him out of the team. It's not doing him or anyone any good.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to happen there, Craig. Unfortunately. I think Thomas said after the Fulham game that he hopes he scores against Bournemouth. So I think his place in that team for the final 2 games of the season is pretty much solidified. But I hope he gets some more goals before the end of the season. I wouldn't care if he didn't, but just for his sake, in terms of maybe adding a couple of more million onto his price tag, I hope he bags 2 hat-tricks, to be honest, so that we can get as much money as we can. But I feel like now the tide is
it's possible he finishes our top goal scorer this season.
Yeah, very true. Let's talk about Bournemouth. Last away there this season, bit of sunshine in the south coast, Dan. Be really nice if we could get the kind of performance we had against Luton compared to the last 2 when it kind of just looks like now we've got safety. It's almost like the players are on holiday or at the beach, as you said in the intro, Dan.
Yeah, I just want a good game. I just want to see them be brave. I mean, Bournemouth have nothing to play for either, but they still seem to be on a decent run of form. So it'll be far from easy, and I think they play quite nice football. So if we can just contribute to that, also play our football, be brave, take risks, don't be too predictable in the lineup and the subs, and just allow players the opportunity to express themselves with 2 games to go. Even looking at the league table now, I think we can overtake Everton and that's it now. So there really is not anything really to play for. But, I just want a good day out. The fans will still go there. I'm sure that away end will be full. It's not the biggest away end. So just entertain us and just, show us that, show us what we can look forward to next season. And that's all I'm really looking for. Even if we don't win, it's an entertaining draw, like 2-2 draw or something like that. I would still be happy with that, and I'd still come away being like, yeah, that was a good game. Yeah, we look good going forward. It was exciting, and I haven't felt that in the last 2 games. I thought that those are the games I could enjoy. Having finally found out we're being safe, but they've been 2 dreadful games, really.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just want a bit of excitement. And just to see what we're about.
100%. The weather looks good. Did a little weather forecast. Saw the.
I'll go to the beach if it's not a good game.
Yeah, the weather looks good, but you're right. It's not going to be easy. I mean, I think this Bournemouth story this season is really kind of underrated in terms of Premier League narratives. Like the fact that Iraola lost a lot of his first 10 games in charge. The fact they even sacked Gary O'Neill before the season after he kept them up. But I think if you looked at their underlying numbers last season, they were quite lucky to stay up. But that turnaround, can't remember where I saw it or from what point in the season, but I think it was maybe after Christmas, maybe they've picked up as many points, and they'd be somewhere like 4th or 5th in the table. So it's just incredible, Craig. But it's not going to be easy. Definitely not going to be easy. They do play some good stuff. Even at Arsenal, I know Arsenal are just on fire at the moment, but they did have a couple of chances. Probably should have had a goal that got ruled out by VAR. It's going to be difficult, Craig.
I mean, they're a team that have kind of flown under the radar a bit this season because, like you just said, they had their slow start and whatnot, and then picked themselves up and went on a bit of a mad run, didn't they? For where they hadn't lost in what, like 10, 12 games. I can't remember what it was. But when you look at the table now, they're only 6 points off 7th. That know what I mean? They could get to the end of the season be in a very similar position as to what we were last year, where we finished only a couple of few points outside of Europe. So they've had a successful season in terms of the type of club they are, like us. Last year we did very well. They've done very well for themselves. If I'm being realistic, I expect this game to be much like the last two we've just had, unfortunately. I would like for an interesting one, but I just don't see it. I really don't see it. I think that it's just a case of biding the time now until we get to the end of that Newcastle game, say goodbye to some certain people, and then we go again next year. I just, I could be wrong. All of a sudden, we could have a 4-4 draw. We could win it 6-0. I don't know. I see it finishing 0-0 and us having about 28% possession. But I just think it's going to be one of those games. I don't envisage any changes.
Yeah, no, I was going to put up the lineup, but I think our preferred lineup will be what it was for the last 2 games, essentially.
Maybe just bringing Matty back in midfield.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah, go the Danish midfield, Norgard, Jensen, Damsgaard. That would be my preferred midfield. Give Yano a rest because I think he's played so many games this season. But yeah, I think that would be a good point to wrap things up. I hope there is a good game. The last 2 have been pretty shit, but we want to hear from you in the comments. Are you over the Toney saga? Do you think the fans should have booed on Saturday? How do we get a win against Bournemouth on the weekend? Let us know. The Eden Road podcast will be back hopefully in the week for a Bournemouth preview. I've reached out to a couple of podcasts, but I'm yet to get a response. So if not, we will all be back next week to go over the Bournemouth game and also look ahead to Newcastle on the final day. In the meantime, though, remember to drop a comment down below with your thoughts ahead of that Bournemouth game. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, and also give us a follow on our socials. That's at the Eden Road on Twitter and at Eden Road Pod on Instagram. Dan, Craig, no Callum, but you two, it's been a pleasure.
Up the bees.
Out the bees.